Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something that really pushes the boundaries of what we think of as personal space, legally speaking.
Hmm.
I mean, we usually think battery involves, direct physical contact, hitting someone, pushing them.
Right. Skin on skin, usually.
Exactly. But what happens if the force is only applied to something someone's holding, like, say, an object in their hand?
That's the core puzzle. It defines what we call the legal periphery of a person. And it's a really critical idea in criminal law, especially when it comes to protecting police officers.
Okay.
So our mission today is to really unpack the New Mexico statute on battery upon a peace officer. We'll use a key case, State v. Ortega, to see exactly how courts figure out where an officer's person legally begins and ends. It's a great example of applying law element by element.
All right. Let's set the stage for Ortega. What happened? This was late at night, right?
Yeah.
In Hobbs, New Mexico. That's right.
Two officers, including Officer Adams, were handling a call, which turned into a traffic stop. Officer Adams was dealing with the driver, but the passenger, a Mr. Robert S. Ortega, started getting loud, shouting obscenities, that kind of thing.
So verbal disturbance initially?
Yes, but then it escalated. Officer Adams went over to talk to Ortega, tell him to calm down, and Adams was holding his flashlight at the time.
Ah, the flashlight. That's key here, isn't it?
It's absolutely central because the whole legal fight boils down to what happened next with that flashlight and whether Ortega's actions crossed the line into actual physical battery.
Okay, before we dive into the specifics of that confrontation, let's get the basic rule down first. What is the general law for battery on a peace officer there? What are the essential ingredients a prosecutor needs to prove?
Sure. The law, Section 302224A in New Mexico, is pretty specific. It says battery upon a peace officer is the unlawful, intentional touching or application of force to the person of a peace officer while he is in the lawful discharge of his duties when done in a rude, insolent, or angry manner.
Okay, that's the official language.
Mm.
Can we break that down into its core components? Like, what are the distinct pieces?
Absolutely. You can think of it as needing 5 key elements. The prosecution has to prove every single one.
Right.
1, the act itself has to be unlawful.
Okay.
2, there needs to be an intentional touching or application of force. Intent matters.
Right.
3, that touching or force has to be to the person of a peace officer. That's our main focus today.
The tricky part.
Exactly. 4, the officer has to be actually doing their job lawfully at the time, in the lawful discharge of duties.
Makes sense.
And 5, the act has to be done in a specific way, rude, insolent, or angry. It speaks to the manner of the contact.
Got it. 5 distinct things. And element 3, to the person of a peace officer. That's the heart of the Ortega case.
I see.
So let's analyze State v. Ortega. First, walk us through the legally critical facts. What exactly happened that mattered for the court's decision?
Okay, the essential facts are pretty straightforward on the surface, but the interpretation is key. Officer Adams approaches Ortega, who's being disruptive. Adams is holding his flashlight.
Right.
Adams testified that Ortega grabbed the flashlight, actually pulled it out of his hand forcefully. And Adams also said Ortega then tried to hit him.
Okay, so potential direct contact, too.
Potentially. But Ortega's side of the story, and this is the crucial fact for the legal issue, was his claim that he only touched the flashlight. He insisted he never made contact with Officer Adams's body, no skin, no clothing.
Ah, so he's admitting contact with the object, but drawing the line there.
Exactly. He's basically saying, I touched the thing, not the person. And that puts all the weight on how the law defines person.
Right. And what was the core legal issue the New Mexico Court of Appeals had to resolve then? What was the precise question?
The question was very specific. Does grabbing or knocking an object, like a flashlight, directly out of a peace officer's hand count as an intentional touching or application of force to the person of a peace officer under that statute?
Okay, so the definition of person is everything. What rule of law did the court apply to figure that out? How did they approach interpreting the statute?
Well, they started with a basic principle of reading laws. Usually, if a statute's words seem clear, you just give them their plain, ordinary meaning. They cited another case, State v. Wyrostek, for that.
The literal reading approach.
Right. But, and this is a big but, in law, courts won't stick to a literal reading if it leads to, quote, absurd or unreasonable results.
The absurdity doctrine.
Exactly. They felt that strictly limiting person to just the physical body could lead to some really nonsensical outcomes. So they decided they needed to look beyond the plain text to define person in this context.
Okay, that makes sense. They needed to avoid a situation where the law seemed, well, silly or ineffective.
Precisely. Protecting the officer means protecting more than just their skin.
Thank you. Now for the court's elemental analysis. Let's walk through this step by step. How did the court apply that crucial third element to the person of a peace officer?
Okay, so this is where they brought in outside help, legally speaking. They rejected that literal body-only reading you mentioned. Instead, they looked to the common law, the body of law built up over centuries through court decisions, specifically the common law of battery.
So they borrowed from general battery principles.
Yes, they basically said the elements for criminal battery and civil battery in this context are, quote, identical. And under common law battery, you don't need direct skin-to-skin contact.
Interesting. So what specific sub-rule from common law did they use to define this extended person?
They pointed to well-established legal scholars, specifically Prosser and Keaton, on torts. The rule they adopted is that legal protection extends not just to the body, but to, quote, anything which is attached to or practically identified with the victim.
Attached to or practically identified with.
Okay.
Like what?
They gave examples. Clothing, obviously, or a cane someone is using, or, crucially for this case, an object someone is holding in their hand.
So the flashlight fits right in there. Okay, now let's do the application part of this mini IRAC. How did the court apply that rule to the flashlight in Ortega's case?
They looked at the situation. Officer Adams was actively carrying the flashlight, using it as part of his duty. They found that the flashlight was, in their words, intimately connected with the officer at that moment.
Intimately connected.
Yes. Therefore, when Ortega grabbed that flashlight, the force he applied to the flashlight was legally treated as force applied to the officer's person.
So the conclusion for this element.
The conclusion for the element to the person was yes, grabbing the flashlight satisfied that requirement. The force reached the legal person of the officer through the object.
Understood. The court was clearly worried about the policy implications of a narrow reading. You mentioned avoiding absurd results. What specific kind of absurd result did the court warn about? What were those extreme examples they used?
Right. They really wanted to drive home why this broader definition was necessary. They painted some vivid pictures. They said it would be, quote, strange indeed if someone could, say, grab an officer's nightstick.
Yep.
Or even their weapon. Maybe spin the officer around using that object, maybe even cause them to fall down.
Wow.
Or, and this was the most extreme hypothetical, cause the officer to fall out of an airplane by manipulating something attached to them.
Out of an airplane. Seriously.
Seriously, and then that person could argue, hey, I never touched their body, so no battery. The court used these extreme examples to show that such a result would undermine the entire purpose of the law, which is to protect the officer's safety, control, and integrity while on duty.
That airplane example certainly makes the point. So, okay, after analyzing the definition of person this way and finding that element was met just by grabbing the flashlight,
Oh.
what was the court's final conclusion regarding Ortega's conviction overall?
They upheld the conviction. They said, look, even if the jury didn't believe the part about Ortega trying to punch Adams, the direct contact part, Ortega admitted to grabbing or knocking the flashlight out of the officer's hand. And based on their analysis, that act alone was enough to legally constitute the intentional application of force to the peace officer's person. The conviction stood.
That's a very clear application. Okay, let's try a quick, visceral hypothetical, just to make sure this periphery rule really sinks in for you, our listener. Imagine a scenario during an arrest. The defendant doesn't touch the officer's body at all, but instead, they maybe intentionally spit on the officer's uniform. Or maybe they grab hold of the officer's heavy patrol belt, the one with all the gear on it. Would either of those actions count as touching the person under this Ortega rule?
Yes, absolutely. Both would count.
Why?
Because the Ortega court explicitly adopted that common law standard. Spitting on the uniform, that's applying force, however slight and, frankly, disgusting, to the officer's clothing, which is clearly attached to them. And grabbing the patrol belt, same logic. That belt is definitely intimately connected or practically identified with the officer's person and their official equipment. It's part of their operational zone of control. So, yep. Both spitting on the uniform and grabbing the belt would satisfy the touching the person element. Direct skin contact just isn't necessary.
Got it. That really clarifies the scope. This has been a fantastic breakdown of how courts analyze these nested legal elements. So, boiling this all down, what does this mean for someone, maybe a law student or lawyer, analyzing a potential battery situation? Could you synthesize the Ortega analysis into, like, a step-by-step checklist for spotting this issue?
Definitely. This case gives us a really useful diagnostic tool. If you're looking at a battery charge, especially against an officer, and there's a question about contact, here's how you can approach it step by step.
Okay.
One, issue spotting. Start broad. Does the situation seem to meet the other basic elements? Was there intent? Was it done rudely or angrily? Was the officer acting lawfully? Check those boxes first.
Right, the foundation.
Two, the direct contact check. Ask the simple question. Was there direct physical contact with the officer's body, skin, hair, anything internal? If yes, boom, the touching the person element is met. Easy case on that point.
Straightforward.
Three, the periphery check. This is the Ortega rule. If there wasn't direct contact, now you ask, did the defendant intentionally touch an object or some item that was intimately connected to the officer's person at that moment?
The flack-like question.
Exactly. Four, application test. Now you apply that common law standard we talked about. Was the object could be clothing, a badge, a tool they were holding like a flashlight or clipboard, maybe even their handcuffs. Was it attached to or practically identified with the officer?
Use those keywords.
Yes. And five, conclusion. If you find that intentional force was applied to an item meeting that intimately connected standard, then legally the element of touching the person is satisfied. The battery charge can proceed on that basis, even without direct bodily contact.
That's a super clear framework. So the big takeaway seems to be that the legal definition of your person isn't just your physical body. It includes this sort of zone of control around you, especially for officials who need that protection to do their job safely.
Exactly. It's a prime example of the law looking at the practical realities and consequences and deciding not to allow a loophole that would lead to those absurd results the court worried about.
It makes sense. You have to protect the officer's ability to function.
Precisely. And, just to leave you with something to think about, this Ortega rule clarifies contact with objects held by or attached to the officer. But what's the limit? Think about this. If grabbing a flashlight from an officer's hand is battery, what if the officer had put their riot helmet down on the hood of their parked patrol car for a second and someone walked by and deliberately knocked it off?
Ah, interesting. Does it still count?
That's the question, right? Does the object need to be actively held or controlled by the person at the exact moment of contact? Or is just being closely associated with them, like sitting on their nearby car, enough? That distinction between active control and mere proximity or ownership, that's where the legal arguments often continue. It shows how these definitions are always being tested at the edges.